Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Donalyn Miller. It's a true pleasure to be in conversation with her. Donalyn's a former classroom teacher who has made a career of advocating for books, teachers, readers, and reading. She's written extensively on these topics, and she's led many online initiatives to build community around book knowledge and reading joy. So, Donalyn, thank you. I thought we would start by me asking you to tell the story of a time when you were engaged in advocacy work. What did advocacy look like for you?
I feel like in my current role, I'm advocating every day because I am in a position where I'm not attached to an institution or a school at this time, which means that I have some freedoms to be able to say things and ask questions of people that educators may not feel empowered or even safe to do. And of course, I know one of the tenets of your initiative is to be safe and to be smart and to look for allies. So I want to stand as an ally for teachers because I recognize, having been a teacher, what some of their challenges are. But I also believe in using my voice to, I guess, push against some of the restrictions that teachers themselves may not feel empowered to do in the spaces where they are. And so, what that means is it's a constant thing. It's not just one event. Yes, I know that lately, because I am in the state of Texas, we are experiencing a lot of book banning here. My former school district, where I was teacher of the year, was sued by parents, making information requests, asking for phone records and emails of district employees. I have colleagues and friends who've been harassed, who've been called names, who have been followed, who have had people driving by their homes. I have colleagues who are the parents of young children who are being threatened. And that is just not okay. It is just not okay for people who have dedicated their lives to the service of their communities to be treated that way. And it's horrifying and frightening. So I think we have to, one, we have to tell those stories. We have to tell those stories because I think we see the people on the news yelling at the school board meeting. That's what we think the face of this is. But the face of a lot of this censorship is much more insidious than people even realize. So, one of the things that I can do to advocate for that community is when it's appropriate, share some of those stories because I think people don't realize how bad it is in some spaces. I think we also have to advocate for where teachers, librarians, and families are coming together in a supportive way around this issue because that's a story that's not being told about my state and states like Florida, that where we see all the negative stories about book banning taking place, because I see a lot of stories where communities are coming together to push back against these restrictions, to push back on the hatred in their communities. And I don't think those stories are being told enough either. So one of the ways we can really advocate, I think, is sharing stories, sharing the stories so that we all have an understanding of the topic in a way that makes it more personal, I suppose. Uh,
Absolutely. You know, Donalyn, one of the catchphrases that has stayed with me since the NCTE convention last November, an anti-racist educator named Anna Osborne said, parents are being used as microphones. If we
mm-hmm,
don't get our narrative out, if we don't shape the narrative, somebody else will. So
mm-hmm.
listening to what you said about the different kinds of stories that are playing out, lots of terrible ones, but there are also positive and inspiring ones. Can
Mm-hmm.
you think of a
Mm-hmm.
particular example where you saw or were involved in getting the word out about the goodness of books, readers, reading, teachers?
The hashtag freedom movement, FREADOM, which began here in Texas, is an organization that is working to share those stories on the internet and also to provide resources for educators. And I have partnered with them on some of the online initiatives that they've done when they've done chats and things. There are our own Texas Library Association here is a powerful organization. And I think one of the ways that we can advocate in a daily way is join the professional organizations that you can as an associate member. So I am not a librarian. I always joke, I'm not a librarian, but I play one on TV. I'm not a librarian. I am librarian adjacent and certainly an ally of librarians. So I cannot be a professional member of the Texas Library Association, but as a community member, I can be an associate member. And so joining our professional organizations, our community organizations, our local organizations that are working to support these efforts is something that we can do on a regular basis to advocate for them. I think we also have to talk to our communities and ask them what they feel they need in support. We have, I can, it's, I, I don't want to be confusing about this issue. I think there are things we can do that may not be a single moment in time of advocacy. It's in the same way that all of us who are working to try to engage young people with literacy, with reading, with writing, with the world, we understand that that is not just one day, one event that makes reading enticing to kids. It's a relentless effort in multiple directions with many resources. And I feel like this is the same. It's what we can do every day in small ways. I also think sometimes it's about what we can say no to. And as a pleaser, as a teacher, as a helper, it has taken me a certain time in my life, regrettably, I would say probably too long, to be better at saying no to things. I know there was a group in Florida that wanted me to come speak with them, and they asked me to send my book list in advance. And the minute they asked me to send my book list in advance, I'll be honest, I knew what they were looking for. You and I know what they were looking for. They were looking for books that they were suspicious of or fearful of, because that's what it really is, fear and suspicion, bigotry. And they wanted to look at that list. And they said, we need to vet your list. And they even used the word vet in the email. They weren't even trying to pretend. And I talked to my husband and I said, I'm not making them a list. Number one, for all of us who make book lists at a professional level, that is work. That is a lot of work. If you are doing it well and thoughtfully and with intention, creating a book list to share with other educators may be days of work and research and certainly reading. And I thought, I'm not doing that for them. The other piece was I thought I probably know more about some of the authors and books on this list than they do. And by putting them on a list, I would basically be pointing these bigots right at them and saying, oh, here's 10 books you didn't know about. You can go ban those too. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. So I refused to turn in my list to them. And, but the way that I did it, I said, well, please send me the criteria that you're using to evaluate my list. And I will consider that criteria as I'm completing it for you. Because I wanted to, honestly, for them to put their bigotry right out loud in the email. And what they sent me was a link to the state of Florida's resources with a general list of resources, that many of them in the common domain, because they were state recommended resources. You'll be happy to know that books like Dr. Dolittle are still being taught places in America. And I basically respectfully declined the invitation. And I told them why. I said, you are inviting me because of my expertise, but I'm not going to be allowed to use it. You don't need me to come to you and read the state list that you have given me. And I think I feel a little uncomfortable talking about that, because I feel like those are the kinds of things that I should just do all the time. I feel like there's a lot of performative things that happen where people purport to be advocates, allies, accomplices, but it's really more about their own self-aggrandizement. And I'm very mindful of not wanting to be that individual. And I'm not going to say I never have been. I can't say that. You know, if you're self-reflective, you have to look at the ways that you have evolved. And I just feel like I have the power to do that. I have the power to say no to something like that. But a lot of our colleagues do not. They do not have the ability to say, no, I'm not doing this. And I think it's not just modeling what we can do that's important, it's also modeling how to say no.
That's a great story. I am so glad you shared it, Donalyn. I'm thinking hard about all the issues that are involved and all the ways that you were mindful of what was being asked of you and how you were being used. I wonder what lessons you think there might be or applications you think there might be for teachers who similarly maybe having their book lists vetted, their curriculum scrutinized, their classroom libraries surveilled. I know there is no easy answer to that question, but do you think that there are parallels or takeaways for teachers as they face similar challenges in their own work?
No isn't always easy. Questions are easier. How have these resources been selected for our students? What criteria is being used to generate this list? Who are the people and parties involved in its creation? How are community voices and student voices being included in the process? What is our district's book selection policy? These kind of questions that a teacher certainly and a community member certainly has a right to ask can reveal if we disagree on almost a moral level with decisions that are being made. Asking those questions requires the people we're asking to justify why it's being done. And I find that that is often not possible. So we can ask questions. I think if I'm being asked to use a resource in the district level over the resources I would prefer to use, then there are ways I can ask questions about where it's coming from. If we have it, what I'm seeing happening is a lot of districts have a book selection policy, but they're abandoning it because of they're just folding under the parent complaints. And so I think a teacher asking if we have a policy, if there's not a policy, how can we participate in helping to create one? And always asking, how are students being considered? Where are the students' voices? Are students being included in this decision making? Because we purport to be a place that is taking care of the whole child in many schools, but there are a whole lot of conversations happening where students' voices are not included at all. And I think we can press for that piece too. I'm the squeaky wheel. I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I think that more experienced teachers may feel more confident in these ways than perhaps teachers who feel less confidence or less experience in their spaces. And it almost demands that those of us with more experience speak up where we can, but also understand that the young teachers in our communities are living this as students too. They've been through this most recently. The lack of access to stories, the lack of access to these voices has been a recent part of their school experience, not just as teachers, but as students. And we are missing out on an opportunity to learn from our younger teachers when we don't give them the opportunity to share both sides of their expertise here, not only as educators, but also as recent students in a K-12 school setting. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Because there are a lot of 25-year-olds who aren't reading anymore, and some of them become teachers. So what happened? And the lack of relevance, the lack of currency, the lack of personal meaningfulness in the text that we share with young people in school is often one of the main reasons they no longer read after graduation. There are people, sadly, that graduate from high school and breathe a sigh of relief that they never have to read another book again. And that is really sad to me. And I bet it's really sad to you and to many of the people who would be listening to this. But we have to take some responsibility there. And by we, I guess I mean the we of adults who are mentoring young people in this world. Um, one of the ways that people become disenfranchised with reading is because they don't see themselves in it. They don't see themselves reflected in the stories. They don't see themselves reflected in the conversations. It's not relevant to their communities. For that reason alone, if we care about the literate lives of children, we should care about these stories
Mhm.
and do everything we can to make sure they get into kids' hands.
That's a perfect final note, Donalyn. Thank you so much. Thank you for pointing out how asking questions can be a form of advocacy. And thank you so much on a bigger scale for all you do to listen to and elevate the voices of teachers, and how you reminded us that student voices are a part of this conversation too. We really appreciate you. Thank you for being with us in this advocacy work. Really glad to have spent some time with you today.